Hey everybody, welcome back to TJ's Modeling Bench. Another 7 days has passed. Today is Sunday, December 15th, 2024. Getting closer to the end of the year, getting closer to some deadlines for some of the things I'm working on. That being the USACC build and my 68 Dart. So earlier this week on Facebook, on Lucas C's Model Car Hobby headquarters page on Facebook, that group, I posted a couple of photos of the progress I had made with my engine. Now the engine is a 3D printed 440 from Matthew Inman at mcvproducts.net. I'm not sponsored by him. I'm just letting you know where I got it, so you can get one if you want it. It's a beautiful engine, beautifully printed. And then I was working on, detailing it a little more with my spark plug wires. And I don't know, I felt like a lot of the aftermarket plug wires that we see are just a little bit too large for the scale. It may not be, but to me, they just seem a little on the large side. So I had an idea. I have some 14 gauge stranded wire that I used on a model railroad layout for the wiring. The green happens to be for my switch controls. Anyway, but it's stranded wire, which means the wires inside the insulation are several individual wires that are wrapped in there to make one continuous piece, right? So what I did was I stripped the insulation off and took those individual wires and then straightened them out, and then I painted them with Testor's enamel paints, with the airbrush. The one thing I would do different this time, on the next time I do this, I didn't use any primer, but I would in the future use an etching primer for metal, which I have some, and I probably should have done that. Didn't really think about it. Because even though it's an enamel, it doesn't adhere extremely well to the wire. So when you start bending it, it will come off. Even though the engine looks pretty good, there are a few spots where the copper wire is actually showing through the paint. But yeah, so let me show you what I've got done, and I'll show you a few other things too. All right, hang on. All right, let me show you what I do with the wire here. So I'll run my X-Acto along the insulation, try to split it open. There we go. And then I'm one of the few guys around, I guess, that actually has fingernails. So I will peel this apart, maybe not. And what we'll do is we'll expose the wires and we'll pull them free from the insulation altogether. All right, let's get to this. All right, there we go. So there are your individual wire strands. And we're just gonna pull these out of the insulation. I don't have all of them separated yet. I probably should have prepped this ahead of time instead of trying to do it all on camera. All right, let me cut further down this insulation, make it a little easier to remove. All right, and you're going to see that the wire's all kinked and bent, and you wouldn't be able to use it as is for your wire, so you're going to have to straighten it out. All right, so there's the wire. And what I do, I'll take individual strands. See, and there's two wires here. See, so they're pretty thin. Now, after paint, they thicken a little bit, so it does look a little bit more scale. But off the bat, they are out of scale. They're too small. but kind of run it through your fingers, get it mostly straight. And then with a ruler, even the small one, just roll it gently back and forth underneath the ruler, and it'll flatten right out, take all the kinks out of it. And then what I did was I take one alligator clamp, and I'll take 2 wires, I'll put one on each side so they're kind of standing like that, and then I'll put it in the paint booth and spray it. And like I said, I didn't do it on this one. I didn't use the etching primer, but in the future when I do this, I will be using an etching primer for the metal first before I use whatever color I'm using on the wires. But it's pretty simple. And I think, personally, it produces a more in-scale plug wire. And that might just be me. I haven't measured anything to see, if it's exact or not. But just looking at it, I think it looks better. All right, here's the engine. It is probably about 95% complete, not counting any weathering that it might still get. So let me zoom in a little bit and we'll show you what we got here. Now, this is not much more than was already done when I posted the photos on Facebook, but hopefully you can see. Let me see if I can get that to focus. Pretty well. Anyway, those are my wires painted. The top of the distributor, I tried to drill it out with the micro drills, and I couldn't get the hole started without busting out a little bit of the side. So if you look close, which you are looking close through the camera now, the top of the distributor doesn't look great. It's kind of a big blob of super glue, because the wires were wanting to fall out. They weren't staying in very good. Plus, the glue that I was using to start with had kind of aged on me, so it wasn't holding as good as it should anyhow. But they're in there. Everything's in place. It is wired properly as far as I know, based on the instructions I had. So, and then the fan, that got installed. And then my belt, that is actually black electrical tape, cut real narrow. And that pulley is not in there straight. Oh, well. Anyway, I cut it out. Let me come back out a little bit here. So the tape was laid out on my Infinity cutting mat, the straight line one. And it took me a few tries to find the right width. And I ended up using this 0.6 millimeter width, so you can see the thin cut that came out right there, and I think it looks pretty accurate size wise. It works for me. Now once this is down in the engine bay, I think it'll look really good. And then the air cleaner filter is all painted. That is not glued on, it's setting on the carburetors, but it's kind of a snug fit so it does not fall off. I still want to make a oil dipstick, and I think I need a drain plug on my oil pan. Yeah, it's looking pretty good though. Also this week, I did a little bit of work on improving the steering column a little bit. So I was a little bit unimpressed with the control column. There's flash on it, and the detail's a little bit soft, relatively speaking. So I thought what I would try to do is make my own from scratch. So what we've got here is some solid styrene rod, and then styrene tube that slips over that, And the original control column, you can see this would be our solid tube portion of it. And then we've got our sleeve that slides over. Now it's a little hard to see because of the flash on here, but at about near the halfway point, but just to one side of what would be probably halfway, there's a ridge that goes all the way around, and that's where your turn lever sticks into the side of it. And also, what's hard to see, that the rear end of this tube portion actually tapers a little bit. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'll cut this off at a certain length, and I'll stick it in my rotary tool, and then I'll use a piece of sandpaper to sand this edge down so it tapers into the column better. And then to make this ridge around the middle, I've got this 1 millimeter bit of half round, and we'll glue that around the outside of it. And hopefully that will show up as a much better looking control column. And it's a little bit larger in size than the kit piece, but I think it actually does look better. And then this, the steering wheel, the spokes of the wheel are photo etch, and everything's been sprayed in primer. That's why it's gray. But yeah, and then that goes on my dashboard. So now that I got these done, I can start doing more, detail painting work. So that's that. And then on the package shelf in the interior, I got my speaker grills added. Back out again. All right. So it had molded in rectangular speaker grills, and I filled that with putty, sanded it down, and then I actually cut out the backside. So hopefully once this is all painted, you'll still have some visible see-through quality to that speaker grill. And maybe, I haven't quite decided yet, but maybe I'll recreate the inner cone and magnets of a speaker. I don't know if that'll be visible at all, really, but I may give it a go anyway. I mean, why not, right? So I think that pretty much catches us up. But yeah. So also this week over on the Hobbydude007 channel, Mark Batson, he threw this out there to the community. A friend of his, I don't recall the gentleman's name right now, but kind of suggested this idea to him. And it's in the vein of, the ugly Christmas sweater thing. So, but it's basically your ugliest model, your ugliest car. And even though I haven't been building a lot of cars in recent years, I was more an airplane guy. Still really am an airplane guy, but I've been more of a car guy lately. Anyway, this car was the first car that I had built kit-wise since probably my senior year of high school. So 1988, 1989-ish. And the one I built actually was very similar to this, but not the exact kit. Anyway, it's the Chevy Nova. And, it was starting really well with the paint color. So I had seen another video where they painted a Camaro with first Testors Gold out of the spray can, the rattle can, TS 31 maybe, or 13. I don't recall exactly. It's one of those, 31 or 13. Anyway, but I decanted that and sprayed it through the airbrush. Went down beautiful, beautiful gold. And then in the Camaro, they topped that with Mr. Color Clear Red, and it looked so cool. But I'm not really a red person. Green is more my liking. So I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go with a clear green. And it really started out well. It looked awesome. I don't even think, look at that, the body's coming off the frame. Anyway, I don't even think I put a clear coat on this thing. But in the end, things weren't going together very well, and I kind of lost interest with it. And one thing I would do different, you'll see the front quarter panels on both sides are separate from the rest of the body. And they have you add that later in the build. If I were to do this again, those would get put on from the very get-go to make sure that they're straight, make sure that gap is filled properly. You know, especially on this side, there's just a tremendous gap at the top portion of that. You know, it doesn't sit right. It's not straight. I did use I think it's Texas 3D printed engine. Got that from eBay. That was the first time I'd done any kind of a 3D printed engine. I was impressed with it. I liked it. I did actually wire that distributor in proper firing order. This was my first use. Oh, no, it wasn't. I was going to say this was my first use of bare metal foil, but it was not. I actually painted with the Molotow pen the trim around the windows. I'm impressed by the Molotow chrome paint itself, not impressed by the pen. The nib, it flooded with paint. It would build up, and you would actually drip paint from the nib of the pen in places you didn't want it. So I shy away from that now. The engine supercharger blower, that I want to say that actually might have been a Rust-Oleum rattle can. I don't recall, but yeah, it's ugly. The hood doesn't fit the blower. I mean, you can kind of get it on, but it's a pretty snug fit. I think there it goes. Yeah. So it's on there, but the hood won't lay down flat. And the front bumper didn't want to attach well. Yeah. One of these days I will rebuild this, and we'll end up with a much better looking product. But you know, this was, like I said, the first car I built in close to 35 years, probably. Oh well. That's my ugly car for the year. Anyway, that's going to do it, folks, for this week. We'll see you again next week with some more updates. Take care of yourselves. Peace and love.